The night Cleveland stepped onto the field at MetLife Stadium, no one expected history. At least, not the kind that trends for all the wrong reasons. Within minutes of the final whistle, social media transformed into a war zone. Hashtags exploded, timelines burned, and the Browns' reputation unraveled in real time. This wasn't a routine loss, or even an ordinary humiliation. This was a full-scale digital meltdown that left the entire organization exposed under the harshest spotlight imaginable. What began as frustration over missed throws and broken plays quickly mutated into something darker. Fans didn't just criticize, they turned. The internet's collective outrage locked onto one name like a guided missile: Dillon Gabriel. Every clip, every misstep, every off-target pass became ammunition in a storm of memes, mockery, and disbelief. One viral post captured the mood perfectly. "This ain't football, this is punishment." Another shouted what thousands were already thinking: "Bench him before the bus leaves the stadium." It wasn't just anger, it was rejection. But as the anger poured in from all corners of the internet, something else caught everyone's attention. Someone else. Standing silently on the sideline, helmet fastened, eyes fixed on the scoreboard, was Shedeur Sanders. No words, no gestures, no theatrics, just quiet readiness. And somehow, that silence spoke louder than anything Twitter could type. It said, "I'm ready. You just don't see it yet." In that moment, the story shifted. The meltdown on the field became the spark for a much bigger fire, one that would expose not just the team's struggles, but the deep fractures within the organization itself. Because this wasn't just about one bad game. This was about an entire city realizing, all at once, that the future they'd been waiting for might already be standing on the sideline. The moment the game ended, the internet didn't just react, it detonated. Within seconds, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit became battlegrounds for Cleveland fans venting years of pent-up frustration. Every missed throw, every stalled drive, every confused expression on Dillon Gabriel's face became fuel for the fire. This wasn't the typical venting session that follows a bad Sunday. This was a fan base collectively losing its patience and its faith. The tone online was ruthless. Memes flooded timelines before the players even reached the locker room. One viral post showed Gabriel launching the ball into empty space, captioned, "He's allergic to receivers." Another meme mocked his overthrow so badly that fans joked he was punting instead of passing. The comments weren't clever humor. They were public executions disguised as jokes. Cleveland fans weren't laughing anymore. They were revolting. It felt organized, almost coordinated, as if the entire fan base had silently agreed that enough was enough. Thousands of replies, retweets, and quote posts all shared the same message: "This isn't bad luck, this is incompetence." One fan wrote, "We don't need analytics to see what's wrong, we just need eyes." The anger didn't simmer, it surged. Within hours, Bench Gabriel began trending nationally, overtaking major NFL headlines. But this digital storm wasn't random. It had been building for weeks, bubbling beneath the surface with every missed opportunity and every stubborn decision from the coaching staff. Fans weren't just reacting to one bad night, they were responding to months of ignored warning signs. And behind the avalanche of tweets, a new name began to rise through the chaos, not as a meme, not as a scapegoat, but as the symbol of what could fix everything: Shedeur Sanders. The conversation was shifting fast. The narrative wasn't about failure anymore, it was about replacement. And while Gabriel was drowning in criticism, Shedeur was trending for all the opposite reasons. His highlight clips resurfaced, his calm sideline demeanor went viral, and fans began comparing his poise to the starter's panic. The message became crystal clear: the people had made their choice. But what most didn't realize at that moment was that this outrage wasn't just echoing through the internet. It was bleeding into the locker room, the front office, and the very structure of the Browns organization. Because when an entire fan base turns at once, it doesn't just make noise, it forces change. And behind all that noise, the quiet tension between Cleveland's quarterbacks was about to erupt in ways no one could contain. While Dillon Gabriel fought to keep his confidence intact under the blinding lights of MetLife Stadium, another figure stood just a few yards away, still, focused, and quietly dangerous. Shedeur Sanders wasn't pacing, arguing, or slamming his helmet like a frustrated backup. He stood calm, chin strap fastened, gloves tightened, watching every play unfold like a general studying a losing battle he wasn't allowed to join. There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than shouting, and Shedeur's silence was deafening. Cameras caught glimpses of him between plays, his expression unreadable, but his message unmistakable. I'm ready. Not ready in the casual next man up way, but the kind of ready that makes an entire locker room rethink who should really be leading them. Every incomplete pass Gabriel threw made Shedeur's presence feel heavier, more unavoidable.
Players on the sideline noticed it too. Some snuck glances his way after another failed drive, their faces saying what they couldn't voice out loud. Others avoided eye contact altogether, not wanting to acknowledge the truth hanging in the air, that the better quarterback was standing right there, wearing a headset instead of a helmet. The tension wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was thick enough to choke on. He didn't need to speak because his body language said everything. No eye rolls, no smirks, just focus. Pure, locked-in focus. The kind that makes veterans nod in quiet respect. The kind that tells everyone watching, this guy isn't just the backup, he's a storm waiting for clearance. And the longer Cleveland refused to make the switch, the more that storm gathered strength. Even the broadcast caught it, the camera panning to Shedeur as the Browns' offense stalled yet again. Millions at home saw it. Fans tweeted about it instantly. Look at Shedeur, you can see it in his eyes, he knows. That image, the quiet QB watching chaos, became the defining visual of the night. Not the scoreboard, not the turnovers, but that stillness. Because while Gabriel's struggles were broadcast in slow motion, Shedeur's patience became the story no one could ignore. He wasn't just a backup anymore. He was a statement, a living reminder that the Browns had an answer they refused to use. And as the frustration grew louder, that silence on the sideline started feeling less like patience and more like a warning. But what the cameras didn't show, what came after the game, would confirm just how deep this tension really ran. Because inside that locker room, voices began to leak. And for the first time, someone from inside the team said out loud what everyone online was already thinking. When the final whistle blew and the players trudged into the locker room, the silence inside wasn't the usual kind of post-game disappointment. It was heavier, like everyone knew something had snapped, but no one wanted to say it first. Helmets hit the floor, pads slammed against lockers, and beneath the dull echo of frustration, quiet conversations started to unfold. That's when the whispers began. Whispers that would soon escape those four walls and ignite a firestorm far beyond the field. Hours after the game, an anonymous quote began circulating online. It didn't come from a reporter's speculation or a fan's theory. It came from inside the locker room. Everyone knows who the best quarterback is, except the guy calling plays. 7 words that ripped through the Browns fan base like an electric shock. It wasn't just gossip, it was confirmation. Confirmation that the same doubts raging on social media had now spread inside the team itself. That single leak changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't about fans overreacting or media pushing narratives. It was real. It was internal. Veterans, the ones who usually toe the line, were now quietly questioning the very leadership of the team. Sources described players frustrated by what they saw as blind loyalty to Gabriel, despite mounting evidence that the offense functioned better under Shedeur's control during practice. One insider even hinted that offensive linemen were losing patience, blocking for a quarterback who didn't trust his reads, who hesitated just long enough to make their jobs harder. In the modern NFL, locker room leaks are like smoke, and smoke means fire. If players are talking, it's because they've already stopped believing in the system. And once that belief cracks, no amount of coaching speeches can fix it. Reports surfaced that several players had been seen consoling Shedeur after the game, quietly telling him, "Your time's coming." Those words, passed around like secrets, reflected a growing divide between the men who suited up every Sunday and the staff that refused to see what was right in front of them. By Monday morning, the quote was everywhere. Talk shows dissected it, sports blogs turned it into headlines, and fans flooded comment sections demanding answers. The Browns' public relations team stayed silent, hoping it would die down, but the damage was done. The locker room wasn't unified, it was fractured. And the moment that leak went public, the illusion of control was shattered. Behind closed doors, Kevin Stefanski faced a decision no coach wants to make: admit he was wrong or double down. But while he stayed defensive and dismissive in his press conference, the truth was already out there. His players had spoken, even if they hadn't used their names. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the tension that started online and spilled into the locker room took on a life of its own, right in the middle of the next game. Because when your own fans start chanting against you, there's no hiding anymore. By the time the Browns returned to the field the following week, the energy in the stadium felt different, tense, impatient, almost hostile. It wasn't the usual home field buzz or loyal optimism that Cleveland fans were known for. It was something colder, sharper, the sound of a fan base that had stopped believing. You could feel it in the air before kickoff, a strange mix of anticipation and warning. Everyone knew that if Dillon Gabriel stumbled again, the crowd wouldn't wait long to turn, and they didn't. From the very first drive, the boos began to trickle in, soft at first, almost hesitant, as if fans were giving him one last chance to prove them wrong. But when Gabriel's second pass sailed over an open receiver's head, the murmurs became roars. Each missed throw, each wasted possession fed the crowd's anger until it finally erupted into something the cameras couldn't ignore: a full-blown revolt.
It started behind the Browns bench. A few voices shouted, "Play the kid!" Then more joined. Within minutes, entire sections were chanting in unison, "We want Shedeur! We want Shedeur!" The sound cut through the air like thunder. Even the players on the sideline heard it clearly. Some stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice. Others glanced toward the bench, where Shedeur stood, motionless but composed, helmet in hand, that same quiet readiness written all over him. Then came the twist no one expected. Jets fans started chanting too. The opposing crowd, who had every reason to celebrate Cleveland's collapse, joined in the chorus. "We want Shedeur!" echoed across MetLife Stadium, half in mockery, half in genuine disbelief that Cleveland was still refusing to play their most talented quarterback. When the opposing team's fans are begging to see your backup, it's not just a bad look, it's a national embarrassment. From the broadcast booth to the social feeds, everyone felt the same thing. This wasn't a game anymore, it was an intervention. The chants became relentless, drowning out the Browns' offensive calls, forcing even Kevin Stefanski to glance toward the crowd in disbelief. Every decision to keep Gabriel on the field only amplified the noise. It wasn't just fans asking questions now, it was a stadium demanding accountability. Shedeur stood there, arms crossed, calm but unreadable, as if he'd been preparing for this moment all along. The cameras couldn't look away. Millions watching at home saw exactly what the fans were seeing: the future standing still while the present fell apart. Twitter exploded again, this time with a single phrase trending everywhere: #FreeShedeur. And when the game finally ended, Cleveland's humiliation was complete. The chants, the boos, the camera shots of Shedeur waiting, they became symbols of something bigger than football. This wasn't just about one game or one quarterback. It was about a team ignoring its own future while the entire world screamed for change. But what came after that night would push the organization past the point of no return. Because while the fans made their voices heard in the stands, Shedeur made his statement in silence, a single image that would shake the Browns' world to its core. The morning after the loss, Cleveland woke up to chaos. Not from ESPN, not from insiders, but from a single post that dropped on Shedeur Sanders' Instagram. No caption, no explanation, just a photo. But sometimes one image says more than 1,000 press conferences ever could. The picture showed Shedeur sitting alone in the locker room, still in his uniform, staring down the turf-stained floor. On the bench beside him sat his helmet, spotless, untouched, like a silent symbol of what never was. The lighting was raw, almost cinematic. No filters, no branding, just real emotion. And in the reflection of a nearby mirror, you could faintly see the team's logo, half lit, half in shadow. Within minutes, the internet detonated.
Fans flooded the comments. This means he's done. He's sending a message. He's leaving Cleveland. Analysts began dissecting every pixel of that photo like it was a crime scene. Was it a farewell, a protest, a power move? Whatever it was, it felt intentional. The kind of post that wasn't just made in frustration, but with purpose. Then came the real shocker. Shedeur Sanders unfollowed the Browns' official account. A small gesture, yes, but in today's sports culture, that's not just a click. That's a declaration. It's a modern-day press release without saying a single word. Within hours, his name was trending across X, Instagram, and YouTube. Everyone, from Colin Cowherd to Shannon Sharpe, had an opinion. Some said Shedeur was making a statement that he was done waiting. Others believed it was a strategic move, forcing the Browns' hand by letting the world do the talking for him. But either way, one thing was clear. Silence had turned into spectacle. Inside the Browns facility, panic set in. PR teams scrambled to get ahead of the narrative. Coaches held emergency meetings, and teammates were warned not to comment publicly. But it was too late. Screenshots were everywhere, reposts flooded every corner of the internet, and fans were now demanding clarity from an organization that had spent weeks pretending everything was fine. And just when it seemed the storm might calm down, Shedeur added one more spark. A short Instagram story, 10 seconds long, showing him working out in a plain black hoodie. No Browns gear, no logos, just a caption. Stay ready. That's all it took. The clip went viral instantly. Every sports outlet picked it up. Every fan read into it. The speculation became unstoppable. Was Shedeur preparing for a transfer, a trade, or a takeover? In an age where athletes don't need press conferences to speak, Shedeur had just sent the loudest message of his young career, and Cleveland couldn't control it. Because now, the story wasn't about a quarterback controversy anymore. It was about a power shift, one that had just escaped the team's hands and fallen squarely into Shedeur Sanders' own. If there's one thing Cleveland fans know better than heartbreak, it's déjà vu. The city has seen this movie before, too many times. A promising quarterback arrives with hype, hope, and headlines, only for everything to fall apart before the story even gets going. From Johnny Manziel's implosion to Baker Mayfield's fall from grace, every era has felt like a reboot of the same painful script. And now it looked like Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel were the latest players caught in that endless loop, the so-called curse of Cleveland quarterbacks.
The pattern always starts the same way. The city rallies behind the next one. The energy feels electric. Training camp buzz builds, preseason clips go viral, and analysts start whispering about potential playoff runs. But then, somewhere between the hype and the headlines, Cleveland does what Cleveland always seems to do. It collapses under the weight of its own expectations. For Dillon Gabriel, it was supposed to be redemption, a veteran presence stepping into a leadership role, ready to prove he belonged in the big leagues. But the moment things turned sour, the city's patience evaporated. Every missed read, every broken play became proof that maybe he was just another chapter in the Browns' endless quarterback carousel. And for Shedeur, the pressure was even heavier. He wasn't just the future, he was the face of it. The name, the brand, the prodigy expected to break the cycle once and for all. But Cleveland's curse doesn't care about potential. It doesn't care about talent, bloodline, or promise. It grinds down confidence, divides locker rooms, and turns once loyal fans into critics overnight. Behind closed doors, that history weighed on everyone. Coaches whispered about not rushing him. Front office execs debated whether they'd seen this story before, and veterans in the locker room couldn't help but feel the familiar tension rising again, the kind that always seems to hit this franchise right before everything implodes. Cleveland has burned through more quarterbacks than any franchise in the modern era, and every single one arrived with the same dream, to be the one who finally ends the cycle. But the deeper you look, the more it starts to feel less like bad luck and more like a curse the team just can't shake. And now, with Shedeur's silent defiance and Gabriel's unraveling performance, fans began to ask the question no one inside the organization wanted to answer. Was history repeating itself again? Because in Cleveland, the ghosts of quarterbacks past never really leave.
They just wait on the sidelines for the next one to fall. Inside the Browns facility, things were no longer tense, they were explosive. What started as whispers of frustration had evolved into an all-out power struggle, and at the center of it stood head coach Kevin Stefanski. Once viewed as the calm, composed architect of Cleveland's rebuild, Stefanski was now being painted as the man holding the team back. His decisions, once defended as strategic, were suddenly being labeled stubborn. And nowhere was that tension clearer than in his handling of Shedeur Sanders. Reports began leaking that Stefanski had privately clashed with members of his coaching staff over who should start. Some wanted Shedeur to get more reps. Others warned that giving in to fan pressure would only worsen the chaos. Stefanski, however, was adamant. He wasn't letting the internet, the media, or a viral Instagram post dictate his quarterback room. He wanted control, and he was ready to fight for it. But that control was already slipping. Players began picking sides. Younger teammates gravitated toward Shedeur, drawn to his composure, his quiet leadership, his magnetic presence. Meanwhile, veterans, many loyal to Stefanski, tried to keep the locker room from fracturing further. What emerged was an invisible divide, not spoken out loud, but felt in every huddle, every meeting, every sidelong glance. Behind the scenes, things grew even more complicated. Sources close to the team described heated exchanges between Stefanski and team executives, with one insider allegedly saying the coach refused to adapt to a changing room dynamic. Translation: Stefanski wasn't ready to give up his grip on the playbook or the power. Then came the breaking point. During a closed practice session, a bystander leaked footage showing a verbal spat between Stefanski and Shedeur, short, sharp, and tense. It wasn't a full-blown argument, but it was enough to confirm what fans had already suspected. The relationship between coach and quarterback was fractured. Within hours, the clip went viral. Sports shows dissected it frame by frame. Headlines screamed, "Stefanski losing control in Cleveland." From that moment, it stopped being a football debate. It became a battle of pride. Stefanski was fighting for authority in a locker room that no longer believed. Shedeur was fighting for opportunity in an organization too afraid to change. And in the middle sat the front office, terrified of making the wrong call again. But as the pressure mounted, one truth became undeniable. The Browns were no longer just losing games. They were losing themselves. Because this wasn't just a team struggling to find its quarterback. It was a franchise at war with its own future. And everyone knew that whichever side won this standoff would determine whether Cleveland finally broke its curse or buried itself in it forever. For years, Cleveland fans clung to one belief: that the Browns' championship window was finally open. The roster was stacked, the defense was elite, and the front office kept promising that this is the year. But as the dust settled from the chaos, that dream began to look more like an illusion.
Behind the highlight reels and press conference optimism, cracks were spreading faster than anyone wanted to admit. It started with morale. Players who once spoke passionately about the Cleveland culture now sounded detached in interviews. Words like trust, accountability, and focus began to disappear from the locker room vocabulary. Instead, there was tension. Visible, raw, and unfiltered. The locker room that was supposed to be united behind one goal now felt like a collection of factions. Stefanski loyalists, Shedeur supporters, and veterans who just wanted to survive another season without being part of the next rebuild. Then came the numbers, and they were ugly. Contract deadlines loomed, cap space shrank, and whispers of upcoming trades grew louder. Key players reportedly began questioning whether the front office had a real plan, or if the team was just pretending to be a contender. And behind the scenes, agents started making quiet calls to gauge interest elsewhere. The message was clear. Cleveland's window wasn't closing slowly, it was shattering in real time. The media didn't hold back either. National analysts went from calling the Browns a dark horse Super Bowl pick to labeling them a franchise stuck in self-destruction. Every week brought another headline, another leak, another signal that the organization's internal issues were no longer behind closed doors. It was public, messy, and getting worse. Fans, once hopeful, turned skeptical. Stadium chants grew quieter, online debates harsher. Even longtime supporters began to ask if this team, this version of the Browns, still believed in itself. The meltdown wasn't just about quarterbacks anymore. It was about culture, leadership, and identity. And through it all, Shedeur Sanders kept training. No interviews, no statements, just clips of him working out in the dark, music low, focus sharp. It was as if he was preparing not just for a comeback, but for something much bigger, a takeover. Because as the walls of Cleveland football started to crumble, one truth echoed louder than ever. When a window closes, someone else is always ready to break through it. And this time, that someone looked ready to be Shedeur Sanders. By the time the chaos settled, one truth stood above the noise. This situation was no longer a debate, it was a countdown. Every game, every press conference, every sideline camera shot of Shedeur Sanders standing helmet on and motionless only amplified the sense of inevitability hanging over Cleveland. The team could deny it, the coaches could delay it, but the future was already in motion. The Browns' locker room knew it, the fans demanded it, the media practically begged for it. And even opposing defenses, watching the tape, seemed to know the same thing. Cleveland's best quarterback wasn't playing. The narrative had shifted from if to when, because at some point, even the most stubborn system collapses under the weight of its own denial. Kevin Stefanski stood at the center of it all, staring down a decision that could define his entire career. Stick with the past or embrace the future. Loyalty or logic. Pride or progress. And as the walls closed in, it became painfully clear that there was no saving both Dillon Gabriel's starting job and Cleveland's season. One of them had to go. Meanwhile, Shedeur didn't need to speak. He didn't need to post. His silence had already become the loudest message in the NFL. Every image, every clip of him waiting, watching, preparing, it became a symbol. Not just of hope, but of inevitability. Because Cleveland isn't just facing a quarterback controversy anymore. It's standing on the edge of transformation. When that switch finally flips, it won't just be a personnel change. It'll be a cultural reset. The moment when frustration turns into faith, when waiting turns into winning, and when the Shedeur Sanders era officially begins. The internet already decided. The locker room already whispered it. The fans already chanted it. Now it's only a matter of time before the Browns finally say it out loud. It's Shedeur time in Cleveland.